Trump is turning off the tap to Iran, and this is not the last blow that he intends to deliver to the Revolutionary Guards. And the IDF is stepping up its fighting against the Hezbollah terrorist organization in Lebanon. Large American forces are making their way to the region in what appears to be a major reinforcement of the United States military, and Trump continues to issue threats. From the perspective of the regime in Iran, they're celebrating victory. Supporters of the Revolutionary Guards in Iran are celebrating the ceasefire as an American surrender and as a clear victory for the Revolutionary Guards. On reports about the renewal of talks with the United States and made it clear that Iran will not give up its control over the Strait of Hormuz, sending a threat saying, "Our missiles will sink the American ships." Iran is threatening and sending another warning to the world. The Revolutionary Guards are threatening that they will disrupt shipping in the Red Sea as well, not just in Hormuz. So, today we enter the new naval confrontation, the Strait of Hormuz, as a turning point in the world order. The struggle over freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb shows how shipping routes in the Middle East are being transformed from routine trade passages into a central tool in shipping into the new world order. All the details coming up real soon. And the Islamic Republic of Iran in Iran is becoming more and more extreme because the new leadership of the Revolutionary Guards is promoting internal repression inside Iran. The war has led to the strengthening of the extremist camp in Iran, with harsher leadership, growing internal repression, and an ideological worldview that sanctifies prolonged confrontation, together with the execution of hundreds of civilians each day. And while in the background, senior Iranian officials are threatening to sink American ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and that thousands will be kidnapped in the event of a ground invasion of Iran, contacts between the United States and Iran are currently advancing towards a framework agreement to end this war. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. Together, we are boots on the ground, and we bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and also the full truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. And this is the opening of day 47 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. The Air Force struck more than 200 Hezbollah targets in the southern Lebanon area over the past 24 hours. That's according to the IDF spokesperson's unit, who said that around 20 launchers, military structures, and Hezbollah terrorists were targeted. And the United States will send thousands of additional troops to the Middle East. This is about 6,000 troops that are arriving abroad the aircraft carrier George Bush, together with another 4,200 Marines that are expected to reach the region at the end of the month. American officials say that this is preparation for a possible ground invasion of Iran. And Donald Trump said our forces can reach sites in Iran within an hour. Tehran is warning that it will attack or seize oil tankers and also merchant vessels, even outside the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. Leaked classified documents revealed how Iran secretly managed to purchase an advanced Chinese spy satellite, which was used for precise monitoring of United States bases during the war. What is the mysterious satellite TEE-01B that everybody is reporting on? How does it operate under the international radar? And why should the Pentagon begin to worry? Because after repeated reports that the United States and Iran agreed to extend the ceasefire, the White House is responding to those reports, saying that the United States did not ask to extend the ceasefire in Iran at all. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded during the briefing with the reporters to the reports claiming that the United States had asked to extend the ceasefire in Iran and said that they were not true. According to her, the next round of talks between the sides will most likely take place in Islamabad. Leavitt added, We've also seen reports about the potential for direct meetings. That has been discussed, but it is not official until you hear it from the United States and from the White House. We believe there are chances for a deal. The president spoke about that yesterday in an interview, and it is in Iran's best interest to agree to a president's terms. He has not been clear about his red lines, about the negotiations with other sides, because we are watching and also seeing how they will behave. And she said that the main catalyst pushing Tehran towards the negotiations table is the economic pressure, not the military successes. The naval blockade has completely cut off Iran's oil exports before the blockade. Iran exported, just before this war started and before the blockade, about 1.5 million barrels per day, bringing in about $140 million. The IDF spokesperson in Persian drops a bombshell on the Revolutionary Guards and proves that Iran is using a military spokesperson who cannot be eliminated. The IDF spokesperson in Persian is raising doubts as to whether the spokesperson of the Khatam el-Anabiya headquarters of the Iranian security forces and the Revolutionary Guards is actually an AI, a fictional figure created by the Revolutionary Guards. That's interesting. The IDF defends its activity and it's deepening its actions in Lebanon, not far from where I'm standing, because more than 200 strikes took place and the Air Force continues to hunt Hezbollah terror cells in addition to pursuit of rocket launchers in southern Lebanon and other terrorists. And during the activity, 5 IDF soldiers were wounded as a result of rocket fire, one of them seriously, while IDF forces continue operating to clear all the terror zones from South Lebanon. The Prime Minister of Israel declared that we will subdue Hezbollah's capital, Binchbel, and work to dismantle the Hezbollah terrorist organization. In addition, the Prime Minister instructed that the security zone be reinforced and expanded towards Mount Hermon. And regarding negotiations with Lebanon, he made it clear the goals are the dismantling of Hezbollah and peace through strength. Trump said this morning in relations to the talks between Israel and Lebanon that the leaders of Israel and Lebanon will speak today after 34 years in which that did not happen. Direct negotiations. A first publication presents the 3 central conditions for the agreement currently on the table. In the IDF, 3 main conditions have been defined for an agreement. One is a buffer zone in southern Lebanon, up to the Litani River, military freedom of action even north of the river, and a long-term process for dismantling Hezbollah under American supervision. The IDF has not received instructions to prepare for a ceasefire, but Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner continue to promote conditions for a maturation of the peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon. I will reveal real conditions of this agreement. The direct meeting in Washington between Israel and Lebanon did not produce a significant breakthrough so far. Still, it's important to remember that there are no understandings on the timetable, and the gaps still remain. According to the sources that we have, the desire to create negotiations and the agreement for a ceasefire in Lebanon were already closed last week between Netanyahu and Trump. They were not dealing only with a temporary pause in the fighting in the north, but with a broader move, giving Israel an operational window to complete its strikes against Hezbollah alongside a planned transition to a political stage that will include a channel of negotiations with Lebanon, leading to a move that will allow quiet and security. I'm Meir Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and together we are boots on the ground, and we bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel. And today I'm coming to you from the David's Harp Hotel on the Sea of Galilee in the northern part of Israel. As you can see behind me, that's the Sea of Galilee. And this is day 47 of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible, click on the subscribe button, and most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get our full behind-the-scene perspective of what it's like to live in Israel under this war. Our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani. So, Mati, on the one hand, the negotiations with the United States is progressing, but on the other hand, Donald Trump is also signaling that he's reaching towards China. How is that connected to this big story?
I think this is one of the most interesting parts of the story, Yair, is the fact that it seems that the Trump administration has really figured out the big picture. And I'll explain what that means. They're not only dealing with the Iranians, they're already dealing with the next war, which is the conflict with China, which is in the background of everything that's happening with Iran. Where do we see this play out? Where do we see this sort of take action or take a root in this entire conversation? The biggest entity that suffers from the Iranian blockade is China. The Chinese are the ones who benefit from cheap Iranian oil, both from their shadow fleet during the war and before the war. And for them to cut off their oil supply starts draining on their national oil reserves and puts them almost into in an emergency mode. Trump did something very, very clever. He brought Xi Jinping in close. He gave him a big hug and he said, guys, this guy over here, he's our friend. We shouldn't let the evil Iranians hurt him. We shouldn't let them take away his oil. Xi Jinping, you're such a great leader. You should be part of the solution in the Strait of Hormuz. And instead of alienating the entire Chinese government, he brought them in and said, look, we're joint venture on this. We're working together on this topic to fight against the Iranians. And in reality, and I think we have an explainer that's going to air later this weekend on this topic, in reality, the Chinese were suffering from the Iranian closure of the Strait of Hormuz. They had a bunch of ships that were waiting for a more peaceful time to open up. And Trump, instead of saying, I'm going to fight against the Chinese and the Iranians at the same time, he helped direct everyone's energy towards the Iranians and said to the Chinese and every other country in the world, let's not make a mistake here. These are our joint mutual enemies. Let's fight against them to open up the Strait of Hormuz so we all get to enjoy cheap oil once more. And this is a very clever way to approach this whole topic, because instead of working with one player at a time, he makes this a global deal. I want to say this here because it's important to remember that about a week ago, there were rumors and there were, let's call it speculations by analysts around the world who were saying that if Trump puts a blockade on Iran, China will have no choice but to send warships over to the Strait of Hormuz to forcefully allow ships with oil to travel out through the Strait of Hormuz and bring them oil because they were suffering from an oil shortage. Now he's diverting everyone's attention towards the Iranian and saying the Iranians are the problem. If they cooperate in the negotiation, we all get oil again, everyone's economy flourishes, we all win, or as he likes to say it, we're all winners, we all win together, and and we get to win together, we get to do this. So anyway, it's a really interesting situation. I want to say one more thing, Yael, which I find to be very unique about what's happening right now. It seems that the Trump administration has really dialed in the pressure points for the Iranians. The Iranians were getting ready in this negotiation to play their usual games of time wasting and drawing out, and arguing about nonsense and then disappearing. And the Trump administration came with clear instructions to last weekend's negotiations. And when the Iranians started with their games, they said, we know what you're doing, and we're calling it out, and we're out of here. And when you're ready to behave yourselves, when you're ready to negotiate in good favor, we'll be back and willing to talk. And they really were able to pull out the effectiveness of the Iranian negotiation games and almost force them into a situation where they have to actually play the US's game. And this blockade on Iran is exactly that. It's forcing the Iranians to play the game that the United States wants and not the game that they want to play.
Yeah, definitely, Mati. And I want to shift to another arena that I'm pretty close to it, which is the northern border between Israel and Lebanon. Okay, just about an hour north of the Sea of Galilee, we have the border between Israel and Lebanon, and it's in the big news, especially here in Israel, because finally, after 34 years, there is the possibility of direct negotiations between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Joseph Aoun of Lebanon. But last minute, before agreeing on a face-to-face meeting, the Lebanese president bailed out on it and said, face-to-face may be too much, let's have a phone conversation. What are the chances of actually reaching a peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon, Mati?
That's a great question. I think there are two questions here. One, will there be an agreement? The second one is, how valid would that agreement be? Because I want to remind everyone who's watching this that we already had an agreement a year ago with the Lebanese government. And in that agreement, they were supposed to enforce the ceasefire. They were supposed to disarm Hezbollah. They were supposed to push back Hezbollah. In reality, it seems I'll try to be generous with them and say they barely tried. It's possible they didn't try at all from what we've heard about this topic. So look, the Lebanese government wants to have an agreement. This is a country that's seen decades of war, decades of civil war internally, and has been dramatically weakened. They're ready for a change. Their big problem is they're terrified of Hezbollah, and with good cause they're terrified of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization that has executed members of the Lebanese government in the past where they didn't align with them. There were past prime ministers that were killed by the Hezbollah terrorist organization inside Lebanon, and they openly, publicly threatened members of the government in saying, if you try to outlaw us, if you try to push us back, we'll come and get you. So the Lebanese government is in a really uncomfortable position. They want an agreement. They want the U.S. incentives, markets, openness in trade, etc. But they're afraid of Hezbollah, and they don't exactly know what's going to happen on the day after. They know the IDF is winning against Hezbollah today, but they have a valid fear, which is if the IDF withdraws from Lebanon, Hezbollah just comes back and slowly pushes back into the areas that the IDF evacuates, and they go back to having to deal with a very violent and dangerous terrorist organization within their country. So there's hesitancy there, there's caution there, there's fear of Hezbollah over there, and as usual in the Muslim Arab world, and most of Lebanon now is a Muslim country, not a Christian country as it used to be in the past. There's not necessarily a love for Israel within the population. Even though Israel are the good guys and Hezbollah are the bad guys, the population doesn't always support the government signing deals with Israel or even indirectly with Israel. So look, there's a lot going on right now. I think there's a waiting period to see where the negotiations with the Iranians go, and will it include Lebanon and the ceasefire there? And two, there's sort of a waiting period to see what happens with Hezbollah. Will Israel continue pushing Hezbollah back and weakening Hezbollah, or is there going to be this like blitz, ceasefire where Israel withdraws and Hezbollah is able to retake their positions? I believe there's a lot going back in their heads of where is this going to go and not wanting to overcommit too early.
Yeah, definitely, Mati. We have about 1 minute and a half. I want to shift our attention to a threat that came from the Ayatollah regime related to the Red Sea. Could you explain where is that to our viewers? Why is that a big threat? And how it connects to the Houthis in Yemen?
Yeah, so this wouldn't be the first time. The Red Sea is the sea that's south of Israel and borders between, well, on our border at least, it's Israel, it's Egypt, it's Jordan, and it's Saudi Arabia that are all sort of in this sea, and it runs down to the Straits of Bab el-Mandab, which borders with Yemen, and then it's on the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, which is this big downward-going triangle or slice of pizza, desert pizza with oil. Anyway, so that sea, if you were to come out of the Strait of Hormuz and go towards Israel and the Suez Canal, you'd go through the Red Sea. For many years, the Houthis were threatening ships going through that area. And the Houthis, such as the Hezbollah is the case, they're sort of the doomsday weapon for the Iranians to hurt, harm, and threaten global trade if Iran is weakened, if Iran is jeopardized, if Iran is having to fight and unable to cause damage. That's really what it is. Nothing new, nothing surprising, and an obvious turn of events. Let me remind people that the United States last year dramatically weakened the Houthis in Yemen. And Israel has continuously put pressure on them, as have several other countries in the Gulf, to really keep them at bay and prevent them from causing additional damage. So nothing new here, just an additional threat that has been looming and lurking in the shadows for a while now.
Well, thank you very much, Mati. I will see you again later on in our evening report. Evening Israel time, by the way. And see you soon. In the meantime, keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. And look for me, Yair Pinto, and also for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms. because across Israel, missiles are still falling, especially in the north, in the northern communities, because the war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon did not stop. We have a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. So all the Israeli communities in the north are still in the range of missile attacks from the Shiite proxy of Iran, Hezbollah. Other parts of the country are quiet for now. Children are back to school, but most soldiers are still leaving their homes to defend this nation in the north. This is real. This is happening now. And Israel needs us right now. The Bible calls us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And today, that calling means urgent, bold, and faithful prayer. It requires also action. Israel must know that millions of believers around the world are standing with them, not just in words, but in support. And that's why TBN Israel is asking you to step up to stand with Israel, because your gift helps bring the truth from the ground here in Israel to millions around the world. It brings spiritual encouragement to believers, and it also provides real support in a time of war. So we want to hear from you first. Send us your prayers at standwithisrael@tbn.tv. We read every single one. Your prayers strengthen us and keep us going on the ground. And also, if you want to help us rebuild the northern communities of Israel and plant an orchard apple, basically apple trees that will provide work, support, and hope for the future, go to tbn.org/rebuildisrael. Again, that's tbn.org/rebuildisrael, and join our campaign to replant the northern communities of Israel. Don't wait. Don't assume that somebody else will respond. Help us rebuild Israel now and plant a seed for the future. Go to www.tbn.org/rebuildisrael. Let's stand with Israel. Let's pray for Jerusalem, and let's act now. Because ships, blockades, and missiles, this is what everybody hears. And this is the morning when this war is no longer measured only by the skies over Iran or along the fire lines in Lebanon, but also out at sea. Tehran is threatening to sink American ships in the Strait of Hormuz, to expand disruption into the Red Sea. And Washington is not easing the pressure. It's increasing it. So what are we looking at right now? Another cycle of threats, or a true turning point in which the world's trade routes are becoming the central front of this war? Let me know what you think about this in the comments. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is day 47 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. And what's happening across the Middle East today tells us one very simple thing, that this war is no longer being fought only with missiles, aircrafts, and military targets. It's also being fought through money, oil, cargo, insurance rates, and strategic waterways on which the entire world depends. In recent days, the Strait of Hormuz has gone from being a geographic passage to becoming a strategic lever. Whoever controls the movement there or successfully disrupts it is not just affecting Iran or the United States. They are touching energy prices, supply chains, and the stability of markets around the world. On the American side, the pressure continues to build. And according to the reports, the Pentagon is sending thousands of additional troops to the Middle East, around 6,000 aboard the aircraft carrier George H.W. Bush and its escort ships, along with another 4,200 Marines from the Boxer Amphibious Ready Group, which is expected to arrive later. This is not just reinforcement, it is the creation of operational depth. The United States wants enough force in the region so that even if diplomacy stalls, it will still have immediate, rapid, and aggressive military backing. That's also the context behind Trump's statement that American forces can reach sites inside Iran within an hour, and this repeated threat that if there is no deal, Iran's bridges and power stations could be taken down within an hour. But the American pressure is not only military. The main engine driving these talks again and again is economic pressure. Before the blockade, Iran was exporting around 1.5 million barrels of oil per day. That was one of the regime's main sources of oxygen. Now, as Washington tries to choke off that export channel through maritime pressure, through sanctions, and warning to anyone who keeps buying Iranian oil, the message is clear. If Iran wants breathing room, it will have to pay a political and a strategic price. That's why the White House is talking on one hand about the possibility of a deal, while on the other hand, keeping all the options on the table. And this brings us to the biggest contradiction of the day. On one side, regional and diplomatic reports say that there is progress towards extending the ceasefire in order to allow another round of talks to mature, and Pakistan is indeed playing a central role in trying to broker another round in Islamabad. On the other side, the White House has officially denied that the United States requested an extension of the ceasefire, and senior American officials have said there is no formal agreement to do so. In other words, there are contacts, there is movements, there is a desire not to collapse back into a full confrontation, but there is still no signed framework, no closed timetable, and no agreement line that can honestly be presented as a finished deal. And that matters because in the Middle East, sometimes even talking about the deal is already part of the pressure campaign. In Iran is sending two messages at the same time. Outwardly, it is trying to look as though it has not been broken. Iranian officials, led by Mohsen Razayeh, say that Tehran will not give up the control over the Strait of Hormuz. They describe the blockade as psychological warfare, and they're using especially harsh language. Our missiles will sink your ships. Razayeh even went on a step further and said that if there is an American ground invasion, Iran would take thousands of hostages and demand billions in return. That is not just a threat. It is also a declaration of strategic thinking in Tehran, not to seek a classic military victory, but to raise the price, widen the zone of danger, and return every move by the enemy into something far more costly, prolonged, and bloody. And hanging all of this is one major question. Can Iran really disrupt the shipping, or is it mainly trying to convince the world that it still holds a powerful lever? Here, the picture is more complicated. The United States says that it is enforcing the blockade and turning vessels back. Iran, meanwhile, claims that its ships have succeeded in getting through and that additional tankers have entered the Iranian waters. Tracking reports also suggest that some vessels are trying to slip through by switching off AIS systems or broadcasting false navigation data. In other words, this is not a sealed wall. It is a dynamic struggle. The United States is trying to close the route, Iran is trying to prove that it can still move, and the whole world is now looking at every tanker as though it was a strategic indicator. And it does not stop at Hormuz. The Iranians threat to expand the shipping disruption into the Red Sea. This is just as important because maybe it might be even more important. Iran does not sit on the Red Sea, but the Houthis in Yemen, their terror proxies, do. So when Tehran talks about disruption there as well, the message is obvious. If it cannot break the American pressure in the Gulf, it may try to reignite the Bab el-Mandeb front. This is the same logic that we have seen before, not fighting in only one place, but creating a network of pressure points. The effect of such a move would not be only militarily. It would hit insurance prices, shipping times, and, in the end, the cost of living in countries very far from this region. And over this entire arena, Trump is adding another layer, the China layer. He said that he asked Xi Jinping not to send weapons to Iran, and that the answer from Beijing was positive. And at the same time, China itself is publicly pushing for normal shipping to be restored in the Strait of Hormuz, while making a double point. On the one hand, respect for Iran's sovereignty and for its security, and on the other, the need to guarantee freedom of navigation and safety in the water. From China's point of view, the logic is obvious. Beijing does not want a direct collision with Washington, but it also cannot afford a prolonged shock in one of the world's central energy arteries. So here too, the picture is double. China wants stability, but not at the price of visibly surrendering to either side. And inside this arena, intelligence has become part of the story as well. One of the more intriguing claims in recent reporting is that Iran used an advanced Chinese spy satellite to monitor American bases during the war. Here, we have to be careful. This claim has received broad media attention, but at this stage, there is still no public official confirmation from the American side laying out exactly what that TEE-01B satellite is, how it operated, or how significant its contribution really was. So the responsible way to present this right now is not as a closed fact, but as another troubling indication that this war is already being fought deep inside the layers of space, surveillance, and long-range intelligence gathering, not only on the visible battlefield. And while all of this is unfolding between Washington, Tehran, Beijing, and Islamabad, Israel continues to press northward. Over the past day, the Israeli Air Force struck more than 200 Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, not far from where I'm reporting from, this direction, about an hour. The targets included around 20 launchers, military buildings, and terrorist cells. This is not another limited round of punishment. This is a pattern of systematic attrition, an effort to reduce Hezbollah's firepower, destroy infrastructure, and hit every cell that enters the launch circle. At the same time, ground forces continue clearing terrorist zones, and the cost on the ground remains heavy. 5 Israeli soldiers were wounded by rocket fire, one of them seriously. And the meaning of that number is that more than 200 strikes is not only intensity, it's tempo. When the strikes come at this scale and at this pace, they tell us that the political and the military leadership are not treating Lebanon as a secondary arena, not waiting for a political decision or a delay. Quite the opposite. Israel is trying to reach the negotiations tables from a position of maximum pressure. It is no accident that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke about Binjbel as both a symbolic and operational target, and he declared that Israel would act to dismantle Hezbollah while strengthening the security zone, including an eastward expansion towards Mount Hermon. The message is simple. If there is going to be an arrangement, it will come from a position of strength. And if there is no arrangement, Israel will keep grinding down Hezbollah's infrastructure without waiting for anybody. And that takes us to one of the most important links in today's story. Lebanon and Iran are no longer two separate arenas. They are two arms of the same picture. While Tehran is trying to gain breathing space through talks over Hormuz, Israel in the north is trying to create a security reality that forces Lebanon to choose between being a state or being a military playground. Trump himself said that the leaders of Israel and Lebanon would speak today in what has been presented as a rare move after decades without such contacts. Even if we should be cautious about dramatic declarations, there is clearly an American effort to connect any agreement with Iran to a broader effort to stabilize the Lebanese front. In Israel, officials are speaking about 3 main conditions. For an agreement in Lebanon, a buffer zone in southern Lebanon up to the Litani River, freedom of military action even north of the river, and a long-term process of disarming Hezbollah under American supervision. On paper, that sounds organized. On the ground, it is much harder because dismantling Hezbollah is not only a question of weapons, it is a question of political power, of structure, of the Shiite community in Lebanon, of sustained American commitment, and of Lebanon's willingness to pay the internal price of confrontation. So even if there are talks in Washington, and even if there is pressure towards an agreement, there is still no breakthrough here that can honestly be presented as fully ripe. There is progress. There are targets and there are conditions, and there are many mines that still are buried in the path. So in the meantime, I call on all of you to stand with Israel. First of all, by sharing the truth. Help us reach more people with what's happening here on the ground. As you can see, I'm in the Sea of Galilee, and we call on you to share the truth and to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. You can also look for Yair Pinto and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms, but the best thing you can do is hit the subscribe button on YouTube, TBN Israel, so you never miss another update of what's happening here, and stay with us, boots on the ground style. So the IDF's Persian language spokesperson publicly raised doubts about whether the spokesman for Iran's Khatam El Anbiya headquarters is even a real person or a figure created through artificial intelligence. Here too, we have to say close to the facts what was published and what was official Persian language that appealed from the IDF to the citizens of Iran, calling on them to provide information if anyone had actually seen this figure in the field or in an interview. What does that mean in practice? First, that Israel is trying to undermine the credibility of the Iranian propaganda machine, and second, that even in Tehran, they understand the battle is no longer only about destroying targets, but also about credibility, fear, and control. And inside Iran itself, the internal picture is no less important than the military movement around it, because several of the reports that are included intend to outside pressure producing moderation. The most hardline camp is becoming stronger. Repression is growing. Arrests are increasing. Fear of internal unraveling is deepening. And human rights organizations are already warning about mass arrests, secret executions, and a broader crackdown. Here, accuracy matters. There is no solid basis to say with certainty hundreds of civilians a day are being executed. There are serious indications of worsening repression, an execution wave, a grave danger to descendants and prisoners, but not a verified number like that. What's clearly grounded is that the crackdown is worsening, and that instead of a weakened regime searching for moderation, a harsher leadership is taking shape inside Iran, one that is more committed to long-term confrontation. And that's exactly what makes this current negotiation a moment so dangerous. On one hand, the Persian economy is under pressure. Exports are being hit, and the regime needs air. On the other hand, the same internal power centers that hold real influence do not necessarily want a flexible deal. For them, prolonged confrontation is also a tool of internal control. As long as there is an enemy outside, it becomes easier to justify censorships, arrests, executions, and enforcement. So even if the Americans believe that there is a chance for a framework deal, that does not mean that all the centers of power in Tehran are marching in the same direction or at the same speed. There's also a third regional arena that is worth watching: the Gulf states. The reported phone call between a senior Emirati figure and the Speaker of the Iranian parliament is a significant signal. Not recognition, not normalization, but an attempt to open a channel for de-escalation. For the Gulf states, the logic is simple. They have already taken hits. They sit on top of major energy and shipping routes, and they understand that any deeper escalation around Hormuz or the Red Sea would hit them directly. So the region as a whole is now moving between two poles, and everybody is talking about peace, but at the same time, everybody is preparing for the possibility that peace may collapse. What's especially striking is that the phrase, "the war may end very soon," has now been heard more than once from the American side, but the actual behavior on the ground suggests extreme caution. When you send another carrier group, more Marines, more troops, and continue speaking about contingency and plans for the ground operations, that is not how a side behaves when it feels that the file is already closing on it. That is how a side behaves when it wants to end the war from a position of coercion, not compromise. So the current American logic appears to be this: speak as tough as though a deal is possible. Speak like a deal is already on the table, while preparing as though it can collapse at any moment. And when we connect the whole picture, one clear system comes into view: The United States is tightening the economic screws, reinforcing militarily, and negotiating carefully. Iran is threatening at sea, projecting endurance, and trying to secure gains without appearing to surrender. Israel is using this window to hit Hezbollah hard, deepen the security zone, and push for an arrangement in Lebanon only after changing the balance of power. China wants shipping lanes open. Pakistan is trying to mediate. The Gulf states are looking for stability. And the Houthis, they remain a shadow threat hanging over the entire regional arena. So the question now is not only whether the ceasefire will be extended, but which side will succeed in defining what extension actually means. It will become a pause that leads to a deal, or just a short breath before a wider, harsher, and more maritime round of war. So, in the meantime, what can you do? You can keep sharing and spreading the truth. You can follow us, and most importantly, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel YouTube channel so that you never miss another update of Boots on the Ground. You can also look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get the full picture of what's happening in Israel. So, today we pray for the safety of the IDF soldiers, for all the security forces that are operating in the north, here where I'm standing, in the south, and on every front. We pray for all the United States troops in this region. We pray for healing to the wounded, for comfort and strength to the families that have lost loved ones, and for protection over the entire people of Israel and this region. We pray for wisdom to our leaders, and we pray for the peace of Jerusalem.